criminal cyber gang has stolen as much as $1 billion from over 100 financial institutions over the past 2 years. The gang, which has been dubbed Carbanak.
The authors of the report call it the great bank robbery of the modern era.
Their ultimate goal was to steal as much money as possible, and they largely accomplished that.
2014, Russia. In the middle of the night, one of the Kaspersky Labs employees is called by, quote, the most stressed out guy he ever talked to, unquote. It was a bank employee of one of the largest Russian banks, and he was so paranoid that he didn't even want to reveal what was going on. He feared that his phone might have been bugged and his emails hacked, and insisted on a personal meeting as soon as possible. It turned out that the bank's domain controller was sending sensitive data to unknown servers in China. The domain controller is the most important server of any business, and if you can access the domain controller, you have control over everything else in that network. This means that whoever gets their hands on this server can do everything from looking at insignificant customer data to adding and removing funds from accounts, and even sending millions of dollars through the SWIFT banking system. So, if this server is doing things that nobody knows about, the bank probably has a very big problem. Astonished by the fact that someone hacked into the domain controller of a bank worth billions of dollars, the Kaspersky employees went to work. They analyzed every single network, phone, and computer connected to the internal banking network. At first, they didn't find anything suspicious. However, some of the computers had the screen-sharing software VNC installed on them, and upon questioning the bank about it, they found out that nobody ever installed it. One of Kaspersky's experts then thought that someone must be spying on the bank employees for some reason. To test his theory, he opened a blank Word document on one of the computers and wrote, "Hello." He then waited, and waited, and waited, until the computer suddenly began to type on its own. "Hello, you won't catch us," was the reply. The experts were now dead set on catching the mysterious hackers, and went on to try and find out just how on earth they managed to gain control over something as important as the domain controller. They discovered that a bank employee had received an email from someone who was claiming to be a legitimate customer. However, in reality, this email was completely fake. To make things even worse, this email had a malicious Word document attached to it. The hackers had infected the file with their malware, and once the bank's employee opened this document, the malware activated itself and installed a VNC backdoor on the computer. This is what is known as a phishing attack, or to be more specific, a spear phishing attack. In these types of attacks, hackers try to look as credible as possible by creating emails that mimic real people or businesses. These emails usually have an infected file attached to them, which can be anything from a Word, Excel, or PowerPoint document, and in some cases even images or video files. Once they successfully infected a computer, the hackers could now remotely watch and control the machine. The attackers then used this infected PC to infect the rest of the machines connected to the network, and to search for the administrator's computer. This is where the next phase of the attack begins. They would slow down the admin computer by running as many background programs as possible and hoping that one of the bank employees would eventually contact IT support to fix the PC. And this is exactly what happened. Once the IT support arrived, they entered the admin passwords and tried to fix the problems on the computer. However, unbeknownst to them, they didn't fix anything. Instead, they had just compromised the security of the entire bank. Thanks to a keylogger, a program that records every keystroke made on the keyboard, the hackers obtained the admin passwords and were now able to log into the admin account and infect the remaining network of the bank. The hackers now had access to absolutely everything, and this is where Phase 3 started. They would spy on the employees for months until they knew how they operated and what protocols they followed. They were basically a shadow employee, silently watching and recording everything the bank was doing. Once they knew about all of the protocols the bank employees followed, the robbery started. First of all, they would impersonate high-ranking banking employees and manually send massive amounts of money to their accounts via the international banking system known as SWIFT. Secondly, they used the bank's e-payment system to send money to their accounts, which then again sent the money to other accounts, located mostly in China and the US. These accounts were then emptied by the henchmen of the group, which are known as money mules. The next method was akin to the stuff of Hollywood movies. Because the hackers had access to the entire internal network of the bank, they were able to remotely control ATMs and make them spit out cash whenever they wanted. These ATMs were usually in remote places, and the money was once again collected by money mules. These methods were pretty amazing, but it was the last procedure that was the most interesting one. They would take accounts that had small amounts of money in them, inflate them, and then pocket the difference. However, this is where they messed up for the first time. They accidentally inflated the account of an elderly Russian man who only had 34 rubles in his account when he went to bed. The next morning, he had over 10 million rubles in the same account. Luckily for the hackers, the bank thought they had made a mistake and no investigation was started. Even though the experts knew exactly how the hackers infected the bank, they were not able to find any traces that would lead them to the stolen $9 million, and the case was eventually put on hold. A few weeks later, Eugene Kaspersky, the CEO of Kaspersky Labs, traveled to a cybersecurity conference in Singapore. There, he wanted to talk about his experience with the Carbanak hackers, and to his surprise, it turned out that this was not an isolated case. Europol, the European Union's law enforcement agency, had also registered a few of these attacks on European banks. The two then decided to team up with the banks that had been hit by Carbanak, different cybersecurity specialists, and a few experts from other intelligence agencies. The group then formed the Joint Cybercrime Action Task Force, also known as JCAT, and started to pour resources into hunting the mysterious Carbanak group. At first, they didn't find any clues about the hackers until one of the Kaspersky Labs employees found a tiny mistake in the Carbanak code. This mistake enabled the experts to send a request to the Carbanak command and control server. In basic terms, if they sent a very specific message to this server, they would receive a very specific answer. However, there was one problem. They had to send this request to the Carbanak command and control server and not any other server. But nobody knew the physical nor the digital address of this Carbanak server. This meant that the Kaspersky team had to literally scan the entire internet and send this request to every single server connected to the web, hoping that one of the servers would eventually answer them with the message they were looking for. After 2 days, they got exactly what they wanted. The Carbanak command and control server answered their request, and as a result of this, the experts were able to find it. The server was located in the country with the best IT infrastructure in Europe and the second best connected country in the world, the Netherlands. The Dutch police quickly managed to get their hands on the server and invited the experts to investigate it. The analysis of this command and control server then revealed the terrifying true scope of the Carbanak attacks. They weren't just targeting banks in Europe and Russia, but in almost every country in the world. From China, Bangladesh, India, and other Asian countries to Africa, and even the USA.
The U.S. is under cyber attack as federal officials warn that a likely Russian-based hack has penetrated deep into U.S. national security infrastructure. The breach is widespread, and there are growing concerns tonight about what may come next.
Without anyone noticing, the Carbanak group had been infiltrating hundreds of financial institutions and stolen over $700 million. After this incident, the investigation got a lot more serious. The JCAT task force began to cooperate with other intelligence agencies that were also searching for the same criminals. These included organizations such as the FBI, CIA, Romanian, Russian, and Moldovan intelligence agencies, and many more. As the experts got closer to the Carbanak group, they suddenly disappeared. The hackers went silent for a few months, only to return and commit the biggest mistake of their hacking careers. Taiwan, 2016. The cybercrime group was back to business as usual, but two of the money mules were inexperienced and would cause a massive problem for the Carbanak group. While they were retrieving money from some hacked ATMs, an unsuspecting local Taiwanese resident approached the bank to also get some money. As the resident approached, the two money mules got so nervous that they left as quickly as possible and forgot a stack of 60,000 NT dollars in the ATM. Surprised about the strange behavior of the two men, combined with the fact that they left a decent amount of money behind, the resident decided to alert the police. The Taiwanese police then watched the CCTV footage of the ATMs and immediately realized that something was off. They acted incredibly quickly, and before the criminals knew it, the incident was all over the news.
The first bank reported that over 70 million NT dollars was withdrawn illegally. The withdrawals were made in both Taipei and Taichung across 34 ATMs and 20.
To make matters even worse, the police had over 500 officers going through all of the CCTV footage they could, and they eventually tracked down the address of the two men. The competence and unbelievably quick actions of the Taiwanese police then led to the identification of 22 suspects. Most of them were Russians, and the rest were from Eastern Europe. The Carbanak group was now in big trouble, and even though 19 of the 22 suspects had already escaped Taiwan, 3 were still there, alone, in a country that was hunting them and with millions of dollars in cash. One of the remaining suspects was a Latvian man known as Andreas Perigudovs. He was the alleged leader of the operation, and after he saw his face on national TV, he quickly decided to cut his ties with the money. He went to a mountainous area near Donghu Park in Taipei, hid 2 bags full of cash, and proceeded to travel to the Yilan province. The other 2 remaining members of the gang were still in Taipei and decided to store their part of the stolen money in the luggage lockers at the Taipei train station. Only a few hours later, 2 men arrived from Eastern Europe, picked up the luggage, and calmly went back to their hotel. What they didn't know is that hundreds of police officers were watching them through the Taiwanese CCTV camera network. Once they arrived at the hotel and left their luggage in their room, they went to have brunch in the hotel's restaurant. This is where the police finally took action and arrested the 2 men. In a perfectly coordinated operation, the police also captured Andreas Perigudovs on the same day. The Taiwanese police had done what nobody else could, and even though the arrested men were only henchmen that didn't know much about the Carbanak group's leaders, the Taiwanese authorities managed to make the first arrest in the Carbanak case. This is where the manhunt for the leaders of the group begins. Spain, 2018. Spanish authorities were investigating a criminal organization that was laundering money in Spain. With the help of Interpol, an international law enforcement agency, the Spanish police were able to find out who was delivering the money that was being laundered and who their clients were. Through sheer coincidence, they discovered that one of the clients of the money laundering criminals was a Ukrainian computer specialist known as Dennis K. After thoroughly investigating this man, it was revealed that he had links to the Russian and Moldovan mafia and that he had coordinated several cyber attacks for them. They had been cooperating since 2013, and while the mafia provided Dennis K with the money mules, he would pay a hefty 40% of all of his profits to these Eastern European criminal organizations. Dennis K. and 3 other members of the group were finally arrested in the port city of Alicante in 2018, and upon raiding their property, police found boxes full of jewelry, 2 BMWs, and 15,000 bitcoins, which, at the time, were worth about $150 million US dollars. The rest of the $1 billion US dollars was never found, and even though Dennis K. was supposedly the leader of the group, Kaspersky Labs believed that there are many more people involved in this. Either way, the group is still active today and still stealing millions every year, operating under different names, such as Fin7, Joker Stash, Cobalt Spider, and many more. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, let us know what you think about the Carbanak group. Video narrated by Eric Peabody.